Coming up, South Korea's first Vice Foreign Minister meets with his American and Japanese counterparts. Topics discussed include the concerns over compensation for Japan's wartime forced labor victims, as well as North Korea issues. Hyundai Motor Company breaks ground on its massive electric vehicle plant in Georgia, the United States. The plant's expected to produce 300,000 units a year from Hyundai Motors, Kia, and Genesis. U.S. President Joe Biden welcomes the news. Plus, President Yoon addresses Parliament to lay out the details of his government's budget bill for next year, while he urged bipartisan support, saying the economic and security situations face internal and external difficulties. The main opposition party decided to boycott the speech, a first in South Korea's constitutional history. Good morning. Welcome to New Day at Arirang. Our top story, the nation's first Vice Foreign Minister held talks with his American and Japanese counterparts on Tuesday. Their mutual concerns and interests, including Japan's wartime forced labor and North Korean provocations, were among items discussed. Our foreign affairs correspondent Kim Dami starts us off this morning.
The first Vice Foreign Ministers of South Korea and Japan met once again, this time in Tokyo, to discuss the legal aspects of implementing the South Korean Supreme Court's ruling on Japan's wartime forced labor. During their 90-minute-long talks on Tuesday, South Korea's Cho Hyun-dong reportedly stressed the need for a sincere response from related Japanese firms when it comes to apologizing to the Korean victims. However, no specific solution was on the discussion table, such as a plan for an independent foundation to pay compensation to the victims. The two neighboring countries have been revitalizing talks on various diplomatic levels in the light of the summit between their leaders on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in New York last month.
Nothing is being decided because consultations are necessary until the very end. But there is a possibility that we will do so we will discuss it with that in mind.
According to Japan's foreign ministry, the two diplomats also agreed on continuing close communication between the two countries over North Korea's recent spate of provocations. North Korea issues also topped talks between Joe and U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman earlier in the day, where cooperation on security was reaffirmed.
The DPRK needs to understand that the United States' commitment to the security of the ROK and to Japan is ironclad, and we will use the full range of U.S. defense capabilities.
Joe and Sherman will meet again on Wednesday to hold trilateral talks with their Japanese counterpart Takeo Mori. Kim Dami, Arirang News.
The Pentagon has once again highlighted the need for deterrence to avoid any kind of arms conflict on the Korean Peninsula. U.S. Department of Defense Press Secretary Brigadier General Patrick Ryder made the remarks in response to a question on the comparison between extended deterrence and the deployment of tactical nukes during a press briefing held on Tuesday. He also stressed that Washington will cooperate with Seoul and Tokyo. This is seen as an indirect way of highlighting Washington's extended deterrence policies, which involve defending the Korean Peninsula under America's nuclear umbrella. South Korea's largest automaker, Hyundai Motor Company, has broke ground on its massive electric vehicle plant in the United States. The ceremony took place on Tuesday in Georgia, where construction of the new plant will start in the first half of next year. Hyundai Motor Group's chairman Chung Il-sun attended the event and emphasized the plant will become the world's best EV production facility. Commercial production is expected to begin in 2025 with a capacity of 300,000 units a year from Hyundai Motors, Kia, and Genesis. U.S. President Joe Biden welcomed the news and highlighted Hyundai's commitment to invest more than $5 billion in the facility, as well as the creation of more jobs than 8,000 jobs. Meanwhile, South Korea continues to demand a revision to the U.S. Inflation Reduction Act, which exempts EVs manufactured outside North America from tax credits. And following Hyundai's groundbreaking ceremony, the South Korean ambassador to the United States, Cho Tae-yong, said Seoul and Washington are working closely to amend the Inflation Reduction Act. Cho on Tuesday said officials are discussing several possible options to solve what Korea claims to be unfair policies. He added that the new act negatively impacts Washington-Seoul relations and the environment as it limits consumer choices for EVs. The ambassador also emphasized that Korean companies are actively investing in EVs and clean energy, making them ideal partners for the U.S. to solve climate change issues. President Yoon Suk-yeol delivered a speech at the National Assembly on Tuesday. The South Korean leader seeks parliamentary support for his administration's first budget proposal for next year, but there could be a rough road ahead. Moon Gun-young has the details.
South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol's State of the Nation address Tuesday proposing his administration's first budget bill was historic in more than one way. Speaking before a barely half-full National Assembly hall, President Yoon introduced his 639 trillion won, roughly $444 billion budget proposal for 2023, the first to be downsized from the year before since 2010, and becoming the first president to see his budget speech boycotted by the entire opposition party in Korea's constitutional history. He urged bipartisan support for his $444 billion budget, stressing that both economic and security situations face internal and external difficulties. The 2023 budget proposes to help South Korea tackle the multiple global challenges and take care of issues that affect people's livelihoods.
세계적인 고금리와 금융 불안정 상황에서 국가 재정의 건전한 관리와 국제 신인도 확보가 그 무엇보다 중요합니다.
This in order to ensure a sustainable and virtuous cycle of economic growth while building a stronger social protection system by earmarking more money for vulnerable groups, including single-parent families and disability benefits. Also in the budget blueprint are funds to restore the nation's nuclear power ecosystem, which the previous administration goal had been to phase out, and more investment in semiconductors. The other pillar of his administration's next year budget, growing security challenges posed by North Korea's continuous provocations, including its recent series of ballistic missile tests that have been carried out at an unprecedented pace.
이는 유엔 안보리 결의에 대한 중대한 위반이자 국제사회에 대한 정면 도전입니다. 7차 핵실험 준비도 이미 마무리한 것으로 판단됩니다.
For that, South Korea's commander-in-chief pledged extra investment in making advancements to its deterrence system and to ramp up cooperation with its ally, the United States, and neighbor Japan to counter any threat posed by the North. He also did not fail to mention his audacious initiative offer, one that promises the North political and economic assistance should the regime denuclearize and come forward for dialogue. North Korea has carried out 27 rounds of missile tests this year alone. President Yoon, who's been in office for a little over 5 months now, urged bipartisan cooperation in having the budget proposal passed by its legal deadline of December 2nd, but that's looking to be an uphill campaign. Moon Gun-young, Arirang News.
Now, building on from that speech, the main opposition party boycotted the annual budget speech by the president. They said it was in protest of what they see as the government's attempt to suppress the Democratic Party with an investigation into alleged bribery. Kim Bo-kyung explains further.
President Yoon Suk-yeol delivered a speech at National Assembly on Tuesday, but did so with less than half the seats filled. The main opposition Democratic Party, which holds the majority, boycotted the president's budget speech. This is a first in South Korea's constitutional history, although the main opposition once boycotted a budget speech read out by the then prime minister on behalf of the president under a previous administration. Instead, DP lawmakers on Tuesday gathered to protest with pickets that read "Stop suppressing the opposition party." The decision to do so was made early on Tuesday morning after the DP's general meeting. The People Power Party called it very improper.
The Democratic Party of Korea refused to hear President Yoon Suk-yeol's budget speech at National Assembly today. What is urgent right now is not suppressing the previous administration nor the opposition party, but people's livelihoods, the economy, and national security.
The main opposition party not attending the budget speech as if it's their privilege and announcing a boycott by making it political is not only improper, but also it is a dereliction of National Assembly's lawful duties and responsibilities.
The boycott came after prosecutors raided the DP's headquarters the previous day as part of an investigation into bribery allegations against Kim Yoon, the deputy head of the DP-affiliated Institute for Democracy think tank and a confidant of DP leader Lee Jae-myung. Kim is accused of receiving illegal political funds of around $590,000 from real estate developers as part of the Daejang-dong land development project in Seongnam City, Gyeonggi-do Province. The delivery was set to be made last year ahead of the DP's primary election, and prosecutors are seeing whether the funds had been used for Lee's presidential campaign. As the issue is related to the controversial Daejang-dong development project that was approved when Lee was Seongnam City mayor, he has instead called for an independent probe. Yet the ruling party is saying that the prosecution's probe is going well, and if Lee has nothing to fear, he has no reason to ask for a special independent probe. As the clash between the ruling and the main opposition party continues, the tug-of-war is expected to go on regarding reviewing and passing the administration's budget proposal for 2023 as well. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Now shifting focus to the war in Ukraine, saying that there is no time to waste, European leaders stressed that the international community must help Ukraine quickly rebuild its critical infrastructure and ensure the country's post-war recovery. Kim Yo-sun has the details.
EU leaders called for the need to begin working on what Germany described as a, quote, new Marshall Plan for the rebuilding of Ukraine.
So that's what is at stake here, nothing less than creating a new Marshall Plan for the 21st century, a generational task that must begin now.
The Marshall Plan was a U.S.-sponsored initiative that helped revive Western European countries after World War II. The remarks were made at a conference on Ukraine's reconstruction held Tuesday, hosted by the EU Commission and Germany, the current holders of the G7 presidency. They stressed that they need to discuss how to sustain the financing of the recovery, reconstruction, and modernization of Ukraine, a process that would last for years and decades.
Ukraine needs fast rehabilitation right now as we speak, especially as Russia is deliberately leading targeted attacks on civilian infrastructure with a very clear aim to cut off men, women and children of water, electricity and heating as the winter is approaching.
The president of the EU Commission explained that the World Bank puts the cost of damage to Ukraine so far at around $349 billion, adding that this is more than what a single nation or a union of nations can pay for. She then called upon the rest of the international community, including the U.S., Canada, South Korea, and Australia, to join hands. In attendance at Tuesday's conference were experts and representatives of numerous international bodies who said the reconstruction must begin now, despite the fact that the war is still ongoing. Kim Yo-sun, Arirang News.
South Korea confirmed 39,450 new cases of COVID-19 as of 9 p.m. Tuesday. That's around 10,000 more than the same time week before. This comes after a couple months of a steady decline in the number of infections. So are we now heading into another COVID-19 wave? Let's connect with Dr. Kim Sing-taek, head and professor at Zoonotic Virus Laboratory Institute, Pasteur, Korea. Good morning.
Good morning.
Now, COVID-19 is showing signs of being on the rise here in South Korea, with cases increasing compared to the week before. To what can we attribute the rise to?
Well, for now, the main reason is that our immune status. So not just about many variant issues at the moment. So the immune response that we actually generate after, whether it is a vaccination or just a natural infection, there are actually two aspects of our immune responses. Number one is neutralizing antibody production, and then number two is the T cell response. The neutralizing antibody is actually just prevent the infection. It's actually just preventing the entry of the viruses to our cells. However, in the case of a T cell response, that actually destroys the infected cell. So in terms of just the infection, but in terms of infection, the neutralizing antibody levels is very important. But the thing that we have learned so far for the last almost now just 3 years is that the neutralizing antibody levels do not last forever. It just declines after, whether it's a vaccination or a natural infection, it declines after 3 or 4 months very rapidly. So then what it means that we can be again just vulnerable to just the reinfection. So the main point at this time is that the reason is that our immune status has changed, and that generally on the population levels, our just neutralizing antibody levels are just declining, so that we are becoming just more and more as vulnerable to just a reinfection.
Right, and I want to shift focus to the symptoms now. There have been studies from overseas recently that report the general and most common COVID-19 symptoms have changed since the early stages of the pandemic. Now, a sore throat and runny nose seem to be the most common. What does this mean for the general medical response team in the country or the rest of the world?
Well, those kind of symptoms that we actually observed since the emergence of just Omicron variant, one typical symptom is that very sore the throat. But in terms of the treatment options, there's no change. The treatment option that we have right now, Paxlovid, Remdesivir, and then monoclonal antibody, and some molnupiravir, they are still just very effective against just a new variant. So in terms of a medical response, it is the same as before.
Right. Now, to the question that we've all been asking for the past few months, health authorities say it's too early to take off our masks indoor, and that we'll probably need another 3 months. But there are signs of increase. Will 3 months be really long enough time for us to be taking our masks off? Indoors, I mean.
Yes, this is just basically based on our just experience in the test, and then also our just observance of the past pattern of the surge, which means just the increase and then decrease of the number of just the confirmed cases. I think this kind of a mask mandate for now is I think this is a government just a precautionary just a step. Now we know that some the foreign countries actually just lift off just a mask mandate in many just places, maybe perhaps except for some public transportation. So then I think so this is based on some past experiences, but our government and then experts should just consider what would be our just ultimate goal in terms of just managing this COVID-19. So based on our just past experience, now just preventing just infection itself is not really just a practical just aspect that in terms of the COVID-19 management. So that we have to focus on the preventing just a progression to just severe diseases and then the deaths. So that in this case, what we have to consider is that how we can effectively just protect the most vulnerable people, including just the elderly people and then the people with some underlying medical condition and then immunocompromised patient. Those should be our just the most focus in our just management of the COVID-19.
That's right, and we've seen the last wave, and we saw that the medical infrastructure was well under control until even at the peak. So, well, thank you so much for your insights this morning, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you.
For a look at news from around the world, we now turn to our Matthew Ashley, standing by at the Arirang newsroom. Good morning.
Good morning, Doyon.
Let's start in Uganda, where 11 children have been killed and 6 others are in critical condition following a fire at school for the visually impaired.
Well, that's right. The fire broke out in the dormitory of Uganda's Salama School for the Blind in Mukono district, and this was at 1 a.m. Tuesday local time. Now, health authorities say DNA tests are being carried out to identify the victims. It's believed 27 children between the ages of 7 and 10 were sleeping in the dorm when the blaze began. Now, while the cause of the fire is still being determined, such incidents are not uncommon. Previous school dormitory fires have been started by unattended candles used by students after lights out, whilst others have been caused by faulty wiring. Now, in more fire-related news, at least 17 people have been killed after a passenger boat caught fire just off southern Indonesia. Now, the blaze started on the top deck of the KM Express Kantika 77 on Monday whilst travelling to Kalabahi from Kupang near Timor Island. The cause of the fire is still under investigation. Officials on Tuesday said 312 passengers were rescued by ships close by and the Kupang Search and Rescue Agency. Search and rescue operations are expected to continue as the number of people on board exceeds the boat's manifest. The disaster is not an isolated incident either. Over 150 people drowned in 2018 after an overloaded ferry sank in a lake on Sumatra Island. Now, WNBA star Brittany Griner has lost an appeal against her prison sentence after a Russian court upheld the ruling on Tuesday. The U.S. athlete was sentenced in early August to 9 years behind bars and fined roughly $16,000. This after being convicted on drug possession and smuggling charges. The 32-year-old was arrested in February at Moscow's Sheremetyevo airport after police found vape canisters containing cannabis oil in her luggage. Now, speaking during her hearing through video link, the two-time Olympic champion apologized for her, quote, honest mistake. U.S. officials, meanwhile, have said the Biden administration is in constant contact with Russian authorities, working to secure the release of detained Americans in Russia. And in our final story, Adidas have ended its brand partnership with rapper Ye, formerly known as Kanye West. Adidas cut ties with Mr. West and his Yeezy brand on Tuesday, following a series of anti-Semitic remarks in recent weeks. Now, the move follows a petition signed by over 90,000 people who called for a boycott of the German sportswear company. This is because they delayed ending the partnership and put it under review, whilst other brands, including Balenciaga, terminated their deals quickly. According to Forbes, termination of the partnership has reduced Ye's net worth to $400 million, removing him from the Forbes billionaire list. Meanwhile, Ye's Twitter and Instagram accounts have been restricted, while a documentary about the rapper has been cancelled.
Good morning. The brief cold snap we had through the first half of the week will ease today, with temperatures returning to season norms along with sunshine. Many inland regions had low single-digit morning lows to start out the day. Taegwallyeong was much colder, so do expect to see a temperature gap of more than 10 degrees Celsius. Southern provinces, meanwhile, will notice wider gaps as morning temperatures are 2 to 4 degrees lower than season norms. Afternoon highs will be a couple of degrees higher than yesterday, though. Seoul and Daejeon topping out at 18 degrees Celsius this afternoon, Gwangju at 20 degrees. Air quality will be normal to good nationwide, and sunny skies with a few clouds in the afternoon. And it seems like we'll wrap up October on a promising note. Other than the East Coast, mostly dry and calm conditions to dominate with wide gaps in temperatures. Typical late autumn weather, with the nation seeing stunning autumn colors. With that, here's a look at the weather conditions around the globe.
And that wraps up today's New Day at Arirang. We'll be back tomorrow for our Thursday's edition at the same time. Please stay with Arirang News, though, for more updates throughout the day. Have a lovely day or evening wherever you are, and take care.